Raleigh Green, welcome to Biscuits and Jam.
Appreciate you having me.
Where am I reaching you right now, Raleigh?
I'm in Nashville at my bar, the Duck Blind. I'm hanging out up here and catching up on some phone calls, and I've been spending some of my time in some warmer weather the last few days, so I'm catching up now. I'm paying for it.
That's nice. I love that you can use that bar as a little bit of a home base and an office.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I was really for opening this bar is where it is. It's in Midtown, and this building that I'm in is where I met 90% of the people I know in the music industry, other songwriters, other artists. I got my start downstairs at Whiskey Jam, like a lot of people did. So it's a pretty full circle place for me, and definitely somewhere I like to hang out.
That's great. Well, congrats on that. And, I definitely want to touch base on the bar a little bit later. I got to say, it's nice to interview an Alabama guy for a change. We're based in Birmingham, so right down the road from where you grew up.
Yeah, spent a lot of time. One of my standout moments in my career, I think, was I was playing a Mexican restaurant in Jacksonville, Alabama every week for about $150 a night. And, there'd be 50, 60 people in there. I did that for about 8 years. And a guy called me from a venue called Iron City in Birmingham. And he said he'd heard my name a lot, wanted to know if I wanted to play down there. And I'd never had a booking agent, manager, nothing like that. I just had my phone number on a business card. And I said, man, the place holds 1,300 people. It'll be empty, And finally, he talked me into coming down there. And I think 1,260 people showed up. And I had no clue anybody knew who I was in Birmingham. So it was kind of an eye-open moment that I might have a chance to have a career in music, because I was just doing it on the weekends when I wasn't framing houses as a hobby. And that was a little bit different there.
Well, I know Iron City well, and I've seen a lot of bands there. It's a great venue. It's always worth going, even if you don't necessarily know the artist, because, they book a lot of talented folks and you might discover someone.
Well, yeah, I mean, they took a chance on me early in my career, and I probably played there after I'd outgrown that venue 2 or 3 more times, just because you always remember folks like that. And I like that smaller, intimate feel. I mean, that's a good sized venue and the sound's great in there. It's always something I enjoy doing.
Yeah. What was the name of the Mexican place that you used to play at?
Loco Mex.
And this was in Jacksonville?
In Jacksonville, yeah. I played Loco Mex. I played a bar called Pelham's. I played a bar called Heroes, a bar called Brothers. And I did that every week. So if you lived in Jacksonville, Alabama or near there, you couldn't go to a restaurant and have a meal without hearing me play for the most part. And, I slowly branched to Gadsden, Alabama, then to Anniston, Alabama. And then it was, Rome, Georgia. And that circle just kept getting bigger and bigger until, folks in Nashville started hearing about it, I guess.
That's great. That's great. Well, we have a connection to Jacksonville here. There's a guy named Rick Bragg who writes the back page of this magazine, and he's done that since 2010. He's probably he's our best writer, and but he's based in Jacksonville, grew up there.
Prince of Frogtown.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's right. That's right. So tell me a little bit about growing up there, and specifically the house where you grew up. What did it kind of look and feel like, and what was it like driving down the driveway?
When I was a little kid, we lived in Pleasant Valley, Alabama, right outside of Jacksonville, right across from my great-grandmother's house. And I can barely remember that. I remember the blizzard in '93. The snow was over my head crossing the street. But just a small, 3-bedroom house, and had 2 older sisters. My dad did construction. My mom taught school. And somewhere around the time I was probably 5 or 6 years old, we moved to Jacksonville, which we called town. And that was, Oxford was a big city to me. It seemed like Birmingham was a day's drive. So Jacksonville was the city, and that was kind of how I was looked at going back out to Pleasant Valley. We called that the country. And they all kind of act like I was a city slicker because I lived in Jacksonville and I went to school in Jacksonville. But we always somehow, I think we lived a little above our means. We always had a nice house, and nobody was really making a ton of money in my family. Used to go down to Fort Morgan, down around Gulf Shores on vacation, and it was a pretty normal childhood. I think I enjoyed the most about it and took for granted a little bit that both sets of my grandparents lived 6, 7 miles away in Pleasant Valley. So I saw my grandparents every day of my life for the most part, and even a few great grandparents. So I was really fortunate to have that tie there. But where I think I lived most of my life was out there in Pleasant Valley and what we called the country. That was kind of where I like to hang out.
That's great. That's great. Well, it's a great part of the world, and you know, really pretty. It's kind of right there at the kind of the foothills of the Appalachians, I guess. The mountains kind of roll right down there.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
it
it's
is. And
beautiful.
the biggest mountain in Alabama is right there at Cheehaw, and that's a few miles away. So we we grew up in what we call mountains. Now that I've traveled a little bit, I realize they were hills, but we called them mountains where I was growing up.
You know, you mentioned your grandparents, and one of your biggest songs was called "I Wish Grandpa's Never Died," and um, you made a video of that song that has a lot of images of your grandfather or maybe grandfathers.
Yeah, both of them.
Tell me a little bit more about them and what your relationship was like with them being just kind of right down the road.
Well, my granddaddy Buford was a very witty guy, really good with words, wrote poems and painted, and uh, I think he would have been a good songwriter had he been around, during that part of my life. And when I was with him, I wrote a song about him. I played at his funeral, and there's a line in it that said, "He never could himself, but he taught me how to play." And I don't really remember what I was thinking when I wrote it, but that's very true. Like he had an old Epiphone guitar, and he couldn't play, but somehow we like sat around and we would just try to learn how to play these old Roy Acuff and Merle Haggard and George Jones songs. And eventually he started to, we'd meet at his parents' house, which was my great grandparents. They'd passed away. We'd sit on the porch, and he'd get my grandmother, little Jean, to bring the yellow pages down, and he'd call up these guys that played the banjo or the mandolin or whatever, and we'd start to meet every week and play. And so I was a, you know, 9, 10-year-old kid sitting around with a bunch of old guys playing Roy Acuff songs. And we eventually started doing it every week and built a stage. We had a sawmill back there. My granddaddy painted a saw blade gold, hung it on the front. We called it the Golden Saw Music Hall. And that went on for about 13 years. And I would just sit up there and watch these guys, watch their hands and figure out how they made chords. And it was never a goal to be in music. That was just kind of how me and him bonded, was over country music. And my granddaddy Lyndon was very different. He was a big fisherman, played golf. His biggest decision every day was whether they're going golfing or fishing. Big outdoorsman, never missed a ball game that any of the grandkids played. And when I was with him, we went fishing or we went golfing or whatever, did something outdoors. So I had three dads. Really is what it was like. And my dad was built houses for a living, and if I wasn't with my granddaddies, I was with him working. So I spent a lot of time with my granddaddies when I could, and I learned a lot from them. And like my granddaddy Buford used to give me and my cousins handshake competitions when I'd see him. We always had to see, and he would say, "Well, that was a 2. That's third place right there." And we'd talk trash about how the preacher's handshake wasn't any good when we left church on Sunday. So he was constantly teaching me life lessons when I didn't really realize it.
Was he around to see some of your success as an artist?
I think it was successful to him what I was doing. He passed away in 2010, so I was still playing local bars, and they came out to some shows. It was a little late for them, but they definitely got to see me play. And me getting on stage at the Golden Saw and singing "Mama Tried" was, that's all he needed anyway. But my grandmother Jean, his wife, is still living today. She comes out to shows quite a bit. My other grandparents, they lived for quite a bit of my career, and they got to see me play the Opry, which I think was the first time I was famous in their eyes, was me playing the Grand Ole Opry. But they got to come to that
I mean,
show.
that's a pretty big deal, Raleigh. That's about as big as it gets right there.
Yeah, I don't think they really cared about much else, but when I did that, it was a big deal. So they've certainly gotten to experience a lot of the success of my career, and it's pretty cool to be able to share that with them.
I saw a picture of you with, I think it was your grandmother, Lola Jean, at the Opry.
Yeah, yeah, she got to come backstage and hang out back there with us. This was pretty recently. Like I said, she was the wife of my granddaddy Buford, who was a big country music guy, and she enjoys it. I think she's just proud of what all's going on. And well, I know she is because she tells all the nurses at the hospital she's my grandmother, and everybody at the restaurant she goes in, you know. So she brags on me quite a bit. But I realize now how fortunate I was to have all of my grandparents in my life for the majority of it, and to still have her around is a blessing.
So, Riley, with all those grandparents around, who was doing all the cooking in your family?
Well, both my grandmothers. My favorite thing growing up was gravy and biscuits, and I liked my grandmother Jean's gravy and my grandmother Nancy's biscuits, but I'd never obviously ever tell them that. But every once in a while, I would kind of trick them into, why don't y'all come together and try it? But I would go drive 15 minutes out of the way, and I hated getting up for school in the morning, but I would get up early to drive 15 minutes out of the way to go eat breakfast at their house before I went to school. But my grandmother Nancy was a great cook, and she passed down a lot of those recipes to my sisters and my mom and my aunt. So we still have good meals when we have family get-togethers.
And what about your mom? She's a teacher?
She's retired now, but she was a teacher, and her sister was a teacher, and both of my sisters did some coaching and teaching at some point. So I've had a lot of moms around, and being the only boy and the youngest, I got scolded quite a bit, I guess you could say. They kept me in line.
So, Riley, I'm wondering about the holidays in your family. You came out with a Christmas song last year. I think it came out last year, called "Christmas to Me." What did it look like in your house, and kind of who was the biggest fan when it came to the holidays?
Well, that's one thing I love about going back home, and whether it's the holidays or just a random break that I get from being on the road, I'm as much of a regular guy as you can be uh, to them, especially, and it's a really good way for me to kind of disconnect and get back to reality, because there's not a lot of reality about what I'm doing on the road. Having a kind of rock star lifestyle is not very realistic, and I don't know that it's healthy to feel that way all the time. So it's nice to go back and be humbled a little bit and spend time with family, and probably more so than anything, it's really useful for me now because that's where I get a lot of my inspiration. And that song, "Christmas to Me," is described it to a T. It couldn't be more true about what Christmas was like growing up. It's a bunch of family members piling into a little bitty tiny house, and opening presents and eating too much, and taking a nap, and then getting up and eating too much again, and watching the kids run around all over the place barefoot. It was a very true story writing that song, a really easy song for me to write as well.
Is there a dish that comes to mind when you think of your Christmas table? Is there one thing that stands out, or something that a family member was kind of known for?
Well, my grandmother Nancy made really good chicken and dumplings. That was kind of the thing, and my mom makes it now, and my mom's sweet potato casserole. It's another thing that I look forward to going home to every time.
When that song came out, there was a photo that was on Apple Music, and it might have been in some other places, and it was kind of a vintage photo. And I was wondering if that was something personal from your family, or not.
Yeah, that picture was from my grandmother Lola Jean's house. That was me in the Dallas Cowboys jersey, and my dad in the background, and my granddaddy Buford sitting in his chair in the corner. I found out pretty early in my career. I think the first photo shoot I did for an album, I didn't really have a manager or anything, and I was so new to it. I just kind of went wherever they told me. We went to this farm, no telling what we paid to rent it out, and I took a picture standing next to a cow and next to an old barn or whatever, and I thought, man, I've got all this. We can come take a picture of my house. And so I've been I made it a point for all of my album covers and to be something that's really tied to me. If it wasn't for trucks, was my old red truck, and my dog Sadie was in the picture, and "I Wish Grandpa's Never Died" was a picture of me and my granddaddy when I was a kid, and another one was a picture of my granddaddy Lyndon on the boat fishing I took with my cell phone. And that's kind of been my way of looking at it. Is I like for it to be a true story, and when I look at the album art, I want it to take me back to a certain place too.
Yeah, you don't really need to make that stuff up, do you? Or, go and rent a vintage truck for, probably a couple $1,000 for a photo shoot, and you got it right there.
Yeah, now we used my truck in the video for "If It Wasn't for Trucks," and it broke down during the video. It overheated, so we had to wait 30 minutes for it to cool off. But I think that's cool. I think it's something. that I think is beneficial in a music career now, especially in country music, is to be authentic with all the access that fans have now, to your social media and all this stuff. I think people can tell. And for me, I like to use things that are true to me and tell a story that I think is pretty real. And I think I'm just fortunate that a lot of people grew up the same way I did.
Riley, I want to ask about your connection to the outdoors. You mentioned your other grandfather was an outdoorsman and loved to fish and golf. And if you go to your Instagram, it's all pictures of deer and ducks and other things you've hunted. Elk, I think I saw in there. Your handle is Riley Duckman or Duckman. I don't
Yeah, however you want to
know.
say it.
However you want to say it. But talk to me about what that means to you, that side of your life. And for a guy who's spending so much of his time on the road and you're playing these stadiums and you're traveling all the time, what does it do for you to have some time in the woods?
I've gotten to a place where a little bit of time disconnecting from all of it really goes a long way for me. I don't need a month off. I kind of realize the opportunities that I have now, and the best place for me to be is out on the road with fans. And uh, I think I got into hunting and fishing and all that from probably more of a competitive standpoint. I think when I quit playing ball, that was kind of my way with the buddies to go see who could, find a place to get the most ducks or the biggest deer or whatever it was. And the sport of it to me, the chase and trying to figure them out was what I enjoyed. And now I think I really enjoy it because it's such a great way for me to get away from everything, to go out, in the woods and climb a tree where my phone doesn't work. And uh, you're not worried about where your next show is when you're sitting in a tree and a big buck walks out and you're bow hunting. So it's really one of the few places I can truly disconnect. And I think that's where I get a lot of my inspiration from, is when you're kind of alone with your thoughts. This is such a wide open career. You're constantly going a million different directions, and it's not just shows, it's not just writing songs, it's not just meetings with management or recording studios. It's kind of a lot of things I didn't realize were a part of it. So it's extremely necessary, I think, for me to have something like that, a hobby that's truly a getaway.
Well, it's kind of meditative. And I think a lot of people don't realize this who don't hunt, but if you are bow hunting, for example, you might be sitting there in a tree alone with your thoughts, watching some very empty woods for,
More
hours
often than not, yeah.
before anything actually comes by. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've got a little farmhouse in Kansas, about an hour and 40 minutes outside of Kansas City. And some of the best sleep I get is going up there by myself and staying in this little bitty 2-bedroom house. And, I'll get up early in the morning and go hunt and freeze in the woods and probably see nothing, and then come back and eat some breakfast and sleep, take a nap, and do the same thing in the evening. And I'll go to bed by, 7:30, 8 o'clock. But it's tough when, a career like, traveling and touring, doing country music, it really never ends. Obviously you have a lot of shows, you have a lot of appearances and things like that, interviews, whatever it is, but like every day you should be writing. That's how I have a touring business, with the songs I beat up. So when I'm in Nashville, even if I'm off work, I feel like I should be doing something. There's a constant. Now I've got a bar, so I've got another venture that I probably didn't need. And uh, getting away like that, physically going somewhere where you really are disconnected from everything else, is kind of the only way to truly get that relief, I guess.
You were in the construction business before you made it big. Um, Framing houses, I believe. What are some things that you learned from those years that have helped you in songwriting and in the music business?
No matter what career you're in, how hard you work you're going to see a direct result of it from, how far you get. And, I have a lot of times where I'm worn pretty thin in this lifestyle, and management will call me and go, hey, like, got an opportunity to do this, you got 10 shows in a row, we're probably just going to pass on it. I go, well, do I need to go do it? And I think that comes from having to do some really tough work over the years. I think playing sports in high school and college, and that accountability, I think when I was 18 years old going into college, I probably didn't have a lot of that. And when you're being forced to get up at 5:30 in the morning and go to workouts and do this and do that and being held accountable, I think that's something that you have to kind of learn. And the same thing was with getting up and going to work in the morning. I didn't think I was going to have a career in country music. I was fortunate. I got to go, play, and a lot of times they'd let me drink for free or give me $100 or something, and I enjoyed playing music. But I thought I'd be framing houses the rest of my life, so I had to grow up kind of quickly. And I think that work ethic was probably something that's helped me a lot in my music career. I can remember my granddaddy Buford always telling me as a kid to grab the heavy end. And I thought that was just one of those crazy old guy sayings. But what he meant was, be the guy that'll work a little bit harder than everybody else. And, I've always kind of had that mentality. I think that's a generational thing. I think my dad and his brother, they kind of valued themselves on how hard they could work, how much they could accomplish in one day. I can remember riding around with my dad and him going, yeah, we did all that. We built that house last year and we framed that one in so many days. And he would jokingly say that when he was running the handsaw, he would say he sawed from here to Anniston and back today. Like he kept up with how far he sawed, So I think that was just something I grew up around, and definitely I think I could have applied to any career that I ended up in.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that the country business, particularly at your level, is a grind. I mean, you are just going 100 miles an hour all the time. You got to get up, bring it every single day. Yeah, so those lessons really have got to stay with you if you're gonna stick it out and do it year after year, right?
Yeah, my granddaddy ran the music hall like I told you about, and I can remember, it didn't make any money. It was free for anybody that wanted to come. Anybody that wanted to could sing. A lot of the old ladies would make snacks, and they had like a break, and there was a little tip jar, and it might have been enough to keep the lights on. But I can remember my granddaddy if you walked in, he greeted everybody. He was pulling chairs up for people and all that. And I don't know why he felt so passionate about that. He just enjoyed music, enjoyed that style of music, and wanted it to kind of live on, and that was kind of his way of doing it. And when I would go play the Mexican restaurant and somebody would show up and there wasn't a table open, I'd get up from playing and go inside and bring chairs out because I wanted everybody to have a good time. And I don't think it was for any reason other than I just saw that done. I saw my granddaddy be the kind of host that he wanted everybody there to have a good time. And I think that's probably where I ended up starting with a music career, because I wasn't the best singer in the world. I certainly didn't write the best songs when I was starting out. So just kind of finding a way to be an entertainer and make sure everybody that shows up and takes their Friday night to come hang out with me had a good time was probably a really valuable thing too. And that was something that I learned from him and didn't really realize I was learning it.
All right, Riley, I want to do a little lightning round that we call the jam session. Okay, so biscuits or cornbread?
Biscuits.
Auburn or Alabama?
Auburn.
Ducks or deer?
That's tough. Ducks. When it's cold enough, ducks.
Okay. Mayo or no mayo?
Mayo.
Okay. Sweet or unsweet?
Sweet. It's anybody that answers that wrong is not from around here.
The best barbecue place in Alabama is blank.
I like the Rocket Barbecue, Jacksonville, Alabama.
Okay. I haven't been to that one. I got to try that. My all-time favorite bar to play in is blank.
Bar. Floribama.
I know you've spent some quality time there. The best dog I ever had was named blank.
Jazz. Yellow Lab.
Is that your current dog?
I still have her, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I'm known for cooking is blank.
Steak.
The next person I'd really love to do a duet with is blank.
Jamie Johnson.
Have y'all ever talked about it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
We're going to find some time. I see that in the works.
that's great. That's great. I did want to ask you one other question about your background in sports and as a quarterback. You played quarterback at Jacksonville State, I believe.
Yes, sir.
And you played a lot of other sports during high school. Talk to me about your football allegiance and what does it look like on a Saturday in the fall, at least when you don't have a show that you got to play?
Well, it's tough for me because, like most people in Alabama, my family was pretty divided. My dad, granddaddy, all of them were Alabama fans, and I was an Auburn fan. But as I've kind of been tied to, Randy Owens, a big supporter of Jacksonville State, and a lot of the coaches that have come through, and I've watched Jacksonville grow. I really am a huge Jacksonville State fan now and try to get back to those games when I can. They're playing a lot of games during the week nowadays, which is great. So in October, I get to come back home and catch some of these games. So a lot of times I've got a few TVs on my bus. They'll be on college football, but I'm definitely keeping up with Jacksonville State and pulling for them constantly.
What's your routine? What's your spread that you put out for a game day?
Well, day games, we'll usually order some food, or I'm thinking about taking a grill on the road this year. I think that'd be a nice addition to it. But we got a TV outside the bus and several inside the bus. So we'll have different games on all of them. And it kind of gives you that, Saturday down south college football feel that I think I miss when I'm on the road.
Well, I love that you pull for Jacksonville State, still, supporting those guys. That's great.
Yeah, man, it was a great learning experience for me going to school there, and I definitely got my start playing in all the little bars in Jacksonville. So it's nice for me now to have a career and a little bit of a stage to be able to try to bring awareness to them and hopefully give back a little bit.
All right. Well, Riley, I want to talk about music for a minute. And I want to start with a new song that you have out called Jesus Saves. It's a song about a guy who's fallen on some hard times. And I've got to say, it's not the song that I was expecting when I saw the title. And I think a lot of people would probably say that. Take me back to where you were when you wrote that one and kind of what the story is behind it.
Well, it was kind of over the holidays last year. Spending time in Nashville, I'd pass. There's a guy that stands on the same corner every day, and they'll sell papers. And one day when I was up there, I thought about him. I don't think I got the title of the song from that, but just the thought of, I wonder what he's been through and how tough it must be for somebody to try to win over a stranger and get compassion by just what they can fit on a piece of cardboard. I thought that was a pretty interesting thing. And I think that we're always kind of quick to assume, they're on drugs or alcohol or whatever that is and kind of write it off. So when I did sit down to write the song, I just thought about what are the things that could happen to anybody that could maybe put us in that same situation. Like what if a few things went wrong for me in my life, and those are real life things that happened to this guy, what would make me feel compassionate enough to stop, and I think making him a veteran was that thing. I think when you see that sign that says U.S. veteran, you always feel a little more compassion for some reason. And I think the message was just, you don't know what everybody's been through. And hopefully that people hear that song, they hear that message, and maybe it makes people think twice when they see somebody that's falling on hard times, because that's really what that song's about.
Well, it's a beautiful song, and I've got to imagine it's been resonating with people, particularly when you play it live. What kind of reaction do you get from folks on that song?
Well, it's very familiar. It reminds me of when I first started playing on Wish Grandpa's Never Died. It's that people, get quiet and listen, and it's so fun to be able to play a show that's got a lot of high energy and people are raising their beers up in the air and singing along, and then you can have a moment where you sit on a stool and turn the lights down and play a song like that. That's really a story, and people, really sit there and listen and kind of go on that journey with you. And there's a lot of pieces of cardboard in the crowd that say "Jesus Saves" on them now, which is a cool thing to see from the stage. So,
oh, really? Yeah.
It's a fun song to have written, and I don't know that it'll ever be a single at country radio or ever be a huge hit for me, but those are the kind of songs that I think really move my career along and get me fans that are, the ones that want to come see a show, maybe just for that one song.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song, and I wish you the best with it, and I think it's going to reach a lot of people one way or another.
I appreciate it.
I want to ask you about a very different song, and that's a song called "You Look Like You Love Me," that just absolutely took off last year. It won a CMA award for Musical Event of the Year with you and Ella Langley. that had to be a lot of fun to do, to perform, to see that thing explode the way it did. Did it catch you by surprise?
It did. Yeah, I certainly had no idea it would be the song that it is. I knew it was a fun song. I thought talking verses was probably a little too traditional, but how cool is it that a song that's that country is doing that well? It's been a really fun song to watch it kind of shoot up the charts and become such a big hit almost overnight. And that's not something that I really experienced with any other songs, a viral success like that. So it's been a fun journey with that one.
Well, we got to talk about Ella for a second. She's a fellow Alabamian. And now you've got a song with her called Don't Mind If I Do, which is the title track on your new album. Tell me a little bit about your kind of offstage connection with Ella.
Well, there's a promoter friend of mine that first introduced me to her music, and I think she opened a few shows for me, in the Southeast, and I've always liked her voice, and certainly, you always kind of pull for somebody from your home state. There's not a lot of artists from Alabama that are really doing all that well in country music, so it's great to have that and share that success with her. Her being on tour with me was awesome last year, and certainly looking forward to a tour together this year, and really just glad that you can have two songs that are very different that are being really successful with the same artist. That's a pretty unique thing. So it's a great moment in the show to have You Look Like You Love Me, which is such a catchy sing along, and then Don't Mind If I Do is kind of the more serious love song, and it's a completely different moment in the show. So it's awesome to have that with her, and certainly happy for her success.
How did Don't Mind If I Do happen? How did that come together?
Well, I wrote the song in the green room at a show in Rogers, Arkansas, and I wrote it as a duet. I didn't necessarily have Ella in mind to sing on it, but was trying to kind of figure out who I would get, just because we had that other song together. You don't see a lot of duets that are kind of back to back like that. And when I went in the studio to record it, I think I texted her and see if she would come by to put a female vocal on it to make sure the key was right for a female, and she just nailed it. I really, as soon as I heard it, I thought, well, there's nobody's going to do any better than that. And so it was kind of accidental that she ended up on that song, but it's been, a huge song for me, and obviously, like I said, a very different song than You Look Like You Love Me.
Just on a personal level, what are some things that y'all have in common, and and maybe what are some things you disagree on?
Yeah, I think Ella growing up in a similar place to me, being from Alabama, I think we have a lot of the same influences musically, which is great. And I think that where we're different is some of the styles of music. I mean, she's quite a bit younger than me, so some of her influences are going to be a little bit different. I think she's got somewhat of a Stevie Nicks kind of thing that I think is really cool. And like I said, I'm a fan of her music, and I think the best thing you can be right now is different, have your own sound, and she certainly has that.
I know there are people that have probably speculated, oh, are y'all a couple? And it's sort of also the nature of the song. I mean, You Look Like You Love Me, and really also Don't Mind If I Do as well. I mean, do you think she would describe you as her type?
I don't know. I mean, being that we grew up so similar, I can certainly see why people come to that conclusion. And at the same time, you really can't blame them. I think as a country music fan, you want to believe that a song's true, and that there's a real love story happening on stage. And I think when that song kind of first came out to be successful, I kind of mentioned to her, like, there's going to be a lot of speculation, and it's not a bad thing at all. As far as her type goes, you'd have to ask her that. I'm not real sure, but it's certainly been something that is sparked from those two songs, and I think probably has a lot to do with why they're so successful as well.
Well, you guys have a great thing going with the duets, and I think your voices go well together, and it feels very organic. It feels very natural, and kind of feels like you've just been doing it for years.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's always nice. You can tell you're doing something right when it's easy. When you sit down to write a song and it just kind of flows out, you're on the right track. And that's kind of the same way with collaborations and other artists as well.
So Riley, I wanted to circle back to the Duck Blind. So this is the name of your bar that you're sitting in right now, which opened last year, I believe, right?
That's right. Yeah, I think around September.
So it hadn't been open very long. What's been the most fun part of this project?
Well, obviously the creative of of opening a bar is exciting. You know, I mean, and it really is me and my buddy that did this. So we got to sit around and go, man, I'd like to hang a deer head over here. Man, it'd be cool if there's a big duck or a neon duck and there's a little step down from this bar into Loser's Bar and there's a sign that says duck your head. You know, we were so excited about, you know, we thought we came up with the coolest thing ever. But it's just been fun to kind of design it and think about what would we like. You know, I'm not too far removed from a fan or just a guy that was going into a bar in Nashville. So what would I like to see in a place? And him being a bar owner and me being a country music artist that performs and has played in these type of bars, that we could both put our heads together and try to make a place that was really, really fun for people to come hang out. And, you know, the upstairs, we got these giant video screens and people come in on Saturdays and watch ball games, and there'll be more Alabama fans than anything up here, which makes me feel like home already, you know. But it's just been a really fun process and obviously a really cool business to be involved in.
Who are some of your hunting buddies in the country music world?
You know, I have to tell people all the time, everybody's like, man, are you buddies with so-and-so? Did you hang out with them? Whatever. And we're all so busy. We see each other like this, you know, like
Right.
you know, maybe we get in the studio together, or maybe we see each other on the road at shows. So I rarely get to hunt with a lot of artists. I took Thomas Rhett duck hunting for the first time a few years ago, and obviously a pretty good collaboration with Half of Me came out of that, and that was a big hit for both of us. So maybe I should do more of it, taking some other artists hunting. But I think I've gotten a little bit stingy with my off time, and when I have the ability to go hunting and get away, I usually try to do it by myself.
Yeah, yeah. It's your escape. And yeah, when you don't necessarily want it to be another business thing.
Well, you know, when you take another artist somewhere, we have so little time together, you can't help but be talking about collaborations or trying to write or whatever. And I've taken a lot of songwriters hunting with me, but at the same time, you know, that it's easy to say, well, I should be writing if I'm here. I got a few days off. And when I go by myself, that's my getaway.
If people show up at your bar, is there a chance that they might run into somebody of note? You know, do you show up there periodically and hang out, or you know, other folks?
That's another reason I was excited about doing this bar, is this really is where I like to hang out at, you know. So
Yeah.
whereas those bars on Broadway, you know, it's great and a lot of tourists go down there, but I've never known any other artist to really hang out on Broadway. You know, it's such a touristy spot. This was really like the locals hangout. And I met a lot of songwriters, a lot of other artists here. You know, since we've opened, me and Jamie Johnson have jumped on stage together, me and Ella, Drake White, Randy Houser. You know, there's just, you never really know who's going to show up. And John Daly might be singing Knocking on Heaven's Door, you know, when you walk in. It's a pretty unique place, and this part of town is kind of known for that.
That's great. That's great. Well, Riley, I just have one more question for you. What does it mean to you to be Southern?
You know, it's one of those things that when you are Southern and that's where you live, you take it for granted because it's just how you grew up. My eyes were open to it when I started to bring down people after I signed a record deal and they wanted to film like a Where You're From piece, and they're like, this is real? You know, the one flashing light and both your grandparents live on the same street and your grandmother's cutting grass out here. And like, you know, it's the things that I've noticed from traveling places that are not Southern. And it's really just the values. It's the importance of saying yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and a good handshake. You know, you don't see that everywhere. I think growing up in a small town is kind of what it means to be Southern for me. You know, I think when you get in some of these big cities, you know, you might travel in New York to work and see 10,000 people and not see the same person twice in a week. You know, I think when you're living in a small town, you're held accountable for how you treat people, you know, because if you cut somebody off at the red light in my hometown, you might see their grandmother at Walmart that day or the Piggly Wiggly, and then she's going to tell your Aunt Becky. And, you know, so I just think that the personality and the friendships and the community that you get in a small Southern town is kind of what I miss when I'm on the road. And certainly what I try to go back and remember as often as I can.
Well, I love that. That's well said. And I also love your grandfather's trick of rating the handshakes. I might have to try that when I'm a grandfather someday.
Yeah, it worked on us. I still judge people off their handshakes.
I do too. Well, Riley Green, congrats on the new album and congrats on the CMA and all the success, the new bar. Thanks so much for being on Biscuits and Jam.
Appreciate it. Thank y'all for having me.